Hey guys, what's up? It's Solo, and I know my volume's probably way too loud, but basically, welcome to what I'm calling the Beginner's Guide to Destiny. Now, this is going to be part 1, and part 1 is just going to be around the story of Destiny 1 and leading all the way up to Shadowkeep, because that's where you'd be if you haven't purchased any DLC whatsoever or any seasons whatsoever up to this point. So yeah, let's get started with Destiny 1 as our first topic real quick.
We called it the Traveler, and its arrival changed us forever. Great cities were built on Mars and Venus. Mercury became a garden world. Human lifespan tripled. It was a time of miracles. We stared out at the galaxy and knew that it was our destiny to walk in the light of other stars. But the Traveler had an enemy, a darkness which had hunted it for eons across the black gulfs of space. Centuries after our golden age began, this darkness found us. And that was the end of everything. But it was also a beginning.
Alright, so the clip you just saw is actually the cinematic you see when you start up Destiny 2 with a new character, and it's basically an edit of the original text that you are given by the speaker when you first are summoned by the Traveler with your ghost, which, if you guys don't know, that's how Destiny 1 starts, is you are found in the Cosmodrome by your ghost, and you're revived as a Guardian of the Light and a Protector of the Last City. Now, you may be asking yourself, what is the light, what is the Traveler, and what is the last city? Well, that's an easy explanation. The Traveler is a giant paracosial entity that gives us the ghosts and gives us basically the powers of the light, which forms into 3 subclasses, Solar Arc and Void. Each subsequently are getting 3.0s, but we'll get into that when we get into later DLCs. And then with the last city is the last known city of humanity, where we are safe under due to the fact of a event known as the collapse, which was basically when the Traveler showed up, which is when they found it on Mars the first time. It had like incredible capabilities, and there used to be cities everywhere, like the guy says. But then the collapse happened in the darkness, and all these people started coming in trying to take the light. And so the last city and the tower are the only places remaining after the collapse. Again, we'll get more into the collapse later on. Now, as far as the main story of Destiny 1 is concerned, it's a lot of learning that there are 4 enemy types at the start of Destiny 1, which was the Hive, the Cabal, the Vex, and the Fallen. And the first one you meet is the first one you meet in Destiny 2, which is the Fallen, which are scavengers who used to have the Traveler as their protector, but now do not, due to the Traveler basically leaving them into the dust. And they are separated into different houses, which we'll get into when we get into the DLC of Destiny 1. The Cabal are kind of like these big turtle-looking, basically tanks, who in the time of Destiny 1 were serving under Emperor Callus, who we'll talk about when we get to Destiny 2, but they were under Emperor Callus at the time. And yeah, so with that leads us into the Hive. So with the Hive were made from what are known as the Worm Gods, which there are 5 from what we know in Destiny 1. And they make a bunch of larvae. Those turn from larvae to thralls to acolytes to like wizards and knights. And then finally, eventually, you become basically like a god, which there are 3 that we knew in Destiny 1, which was Oryx, Crota, and then we heard about, there was 4, sorry. Oryx, Crota, Zivurath, and Savathun, and that's the ones we knew about, but the only 2 that are important here are Crota and Oryx, because they are the only ones who were basically worshipped as gods in this in Destiny 1. So anyway, that leads us to the, I believe, let's see, the Vex. So the Vex are machines that are birthed from the Black Garden, which we'll get to with the Destiny 1 story, and they basically open time gates anywhere and just come into an instant, and they're basically robots that can time travel, and they're we don't know exactly where they get built or where they come from, and I'll get into that also with the story, but we just know that they're trying to get the best outcome for a Vex, which is basically just only having the Vex as a hive mind, and that's basically it. So anyway, Destiny 2's story is all about you as a Guardian basically being reborn as a Guardian, not remembering anything of your past life, and basically being told, hey, you need to help other Guardians in this journey to protect the last city from the darkness and all of its allies, which are basically generalized into the 4 enemy types I told you about. And so the main point of the story is eventually you meet up with the Exo Stranger, and the Exo Stranger, she tells you that there is a place known as the Black Garden that houses a heart that can corrupt Guardians and things like that into worshipping the darkness, so you gotta go take it out. And so the whole plot around Destiny 1's main campaign was that you go through, you do different quests to weaken defenses, and then you go in and you get rid of the heart. Now, we also learn in the Black Garden that there are a bunch of Vex defending the Black Garden. And originally, a lot of people theorized that the Black Garden was the birthplace of the Vex, but later on we will learn and come to find out that that was wrong. Now that the main story of Destiny is done, we move on to what is known as House of Wolves, and this was actually when I came in to the Destiny universe, was actually House of Wolves, and I remember this because I remember when I loaded in, there was a bunch of stuff from the House of Wolves, and basically, House of Wolves was a new expansion that came out that basically entailed that the Awoken, who were led by a queen known as Marisov and her brother known as Oljensov, they were basically aligned with a house known as the House of Wolves. Well, eventually the House of Wolves turned around and stabbed them in the back. Well, the next thing, is that you are being invited in and being drafted under the Queen's Wrath to basically go and go into the House of Wolves and kill basically all of the House of Wolves, including Skolas, who was, I believe, the Kell of the House of the Wolves. Let me see. Sorry, I have to, follow Skolas. Oh, no, you capture Skolas. And so, Skolas gets captured, and then that's basically the end of House of Wolves. And it was an interesting thing because it gave us a new premise. It gave us a few new supplemental characters, including Petrovenge, Marisov, and Oljensov, which they'll be important later. Also, I forgot to mention at this time there was 3 Vanguard, Cade 6 was Hunters, Zavala was the Titans, and Ikora Ray was the Warlocks. This will be important later as well when we get up to Destiny 2. Anyway, so the next expansion would be Crota's, or the Dark Below, I should say, which introduces us to the character of Eris Morn, which Eris Morn is a guardian who has lost her light, and the story is that her and 5 other people went down into what is known as the Hellmouth on the moon, and this hive god Crota, actually, I think it was Crota, but down there, the hive drained her of her light and basically killed all of her teammates on her fire team, and she's the only one left. She wears like a piece of cloth over her eyes because she has 3 of them, and they basically make her look like a hive. And she has a floating orb that she carries around all the time, which helps her like do hive magic, which again will be prevalent in the future. So the whole story of that is we go down into the Hellmouth and we are introduced to our first basically high level hive who is treated as a god, which is Crota, who is the son of previously mentioned Oryx, who is aptly named the Taken King, but we will definitely get to that because that's actually the next point. But anyway, so we go in and we find out, we basically try to stop them from summoning Crota, so we get rid of Crota the first time. He goes back to what are known as throne rooms, throne rooms, which basically is in the Ascendant Plane, and it's the only way to actually kill the Hive Gods, because they're basically like second lives, and if you kill them in their throne world, then, in their throne world, they will be dead, like actually dead. And so with this, when they're making throne worlds, they follow what's known as the sword logic, which is basically a premise that the hive are making rituals that feed into gods that make them more powerful and let them expand their throne world over time. Just to give you a basic definition of what I mean by the sword logic. And the sword logic is usually that the strong survive. And so, anyway, as we continue on, we get our first raid, which is called Crota's End, which is us going into Crota's throne world and basically kicking him in the teeth. This one was funny for a couple of reasons. Mostly because when you see the Oversoul that Crota can spawn in his throne world, um, you kind of just go, I'm scared. Because it's literally just a giant orb that when it does extinguish, it just destroys everything except for Crota. And that was the big thing during the raid, is the Oversoul and then Crota himself, which there's still a glitch even with the raid being reprised at the end of Destiny 1. There's still a glitch where Crota can come through the door that is supposed to be safe and just destroy your entire fire team. And it was a funny glitch when it lasted. But anyway, let's move on to Destiny 2's third expansion, and at the time the biggest. And this is what people call the saving grace of Destiny 1, which was the Taken King. And the Taken King was basically, you remember Oryx I was talking about? He got mad because we killed his son, so he came and landed in Saturn with was known as the Dreadnought, which is his giant ship. And above the Dreadnought is where his throne world is, actually. Or throne world. Again, I'm going to be saying throne world, but sometimes it's rooms, sometimes it's world. Anyway, so you're tasked with basically stopping him, because at the beginning of it, you see Prince Uldren and Marasov and the Awoken try to combat them and are basically being unable to. And you see what you believe is the death of a bunch of Awoken, including the Queen herself, Marasov. And of course, this shakes Uldrenzov because, well, it's his sister, so yeah. Gonna be pretty tense there. But anyway, so you're tasked with going in and basically destroying Oryx. And so you go in and you kind of investigate around, and like, honestly, going in and fighting Oryx is probably still one of the coolest scenes in Destiny 2. Or sorry, not Destiny 2, Destiny. Because when you go in the story mission to fight Oryx, because remember, he's a hive god, so he has his throne world to go back to. But when you go into his room, it like opens up with like the Taken King symbol, and then when it opens, all of a sudden like the surrounding area like is like scratched inward, and then just like rotates around him and turns into his wings. And it's like one of the coolest animations I've seen, but I've seen a lot of better ones when it came to Destiny 2 at least. But anyway, so yeah, you go in, you kill him for the first time in the story mission, and then you turn around and you have King's Fall, which is the raid, which is actually rumored to be reprised in Season 18. But we won't get into that until we make another video going over Destiny 2's DLCs after Shadowkeep. But, so next you have what is known as Rise of Iron. Now, during this whole time, there was an activity that would come around known as Iron Banner. And basically, the point of Iron Banner was that light levels mattered, and that you basically fought to appease a guy known as Saladin, who is known as an Iron Lord, but only him and Lady Aphrodite were ever seen, or I think there was 2 to 3 of them, but anyway, they were the only Iron Lords that you'd ever seen. You'd heard of other Iron Lords, but you didn't know what happened. Well, when Rise of Iron came out, we finally got an answer to that, which was that a self-replicating technology that was developed by Clovis Bray to basically make buildings and technology really fast. They were nanobots, and it was called SIVA. Now, with SIVA, came ups and downs because after the collapse happened, Siva basically got corrupted and started having a mind of its own and was basically protected by the War Mind because the War Mind didn't want Siva to get out into the hands of the Iron Lords or the Warlords at the time after the collapse. So anyway, the story is that like hundreds of Iron Lords went into this like keep where Siva was supposedly being held. Rasputin killed a lot of them, and only like a handful made it to the final chamber, which then you get a cutscene in Rise of Iron where the Iron Lords basically are fighting off Siva, and Saladin gets basically pushed out of the chamber, and the chamber closes and explodes. And that's where we basically start off, and he's like, yeah, no, Siva's been sealed for years, and then you find out a house in the Fallen has gotten what are known as splicers, and the splicers have opened up into the Siva, where the Siva compound was, and have gotten access to it and are using it against us. And so we have to go stop them. And that's the whole premise of it. You go in, you go through, and you're basically going in and countering Siva. Well, this is where things get really, really interesting, because when you go in, I think it's like some of the missions you're fighting Iron Lords, but with the last mission, you fight all the Iron Lords that fell in the final chamber. And it's interesting because it's the first time we ever see a double-sided like axe in the game, and it was pretty cool. You get to use it, and yeah, it was cool. Anyway, it ends with you basically shutting it all down and blowing up Siva, and that was basically like the end of it. It gets secured, and that's where you leave Siva. Now, you also become an Iron Lord in the process, and you find out that there is one last Siva threat, which is, again, another raid known as Wrath of the Machine, which again people think might also be coming to Destiny 2 soon. And the final boss is known as Axis, which was a fallen splicer who basically put more Siva into himself and basically controls all of it, or tries to. Anyway, you kill him, and then if you do a challenge, you get what's known as, I think it was just called Outbreak. Was it Outbreak Prime? Or was it, because I know there's like 3 versions of that gun at this point. But anyway, it was one of the Outbreak versions that you got back then. And then, and then we led into Moments of Triumph, which was the last ever thing that happened in Destiny 1. And that was basically what they did, is they went back and they basically cataloged the moments of Destiny 1 and then made what are known as hard mode raids, which was basically really challenging versions of raids that gave you ornaments to put on your armor. And there are also things that people wish were in Destiny 2 to this day, because just because of how the armor design was for those sets was really good, especially for 2 of the sets people really liked, which was King's Falls set and then Wrath of the Machine's Nanomania set. Anyway, that's where we leave off with Destiny 1. Now, let's talk about the story for Destiny 2. Alright, with that out of the way, welcome to the story of Destiny 2. Now, the start of Destiny 2 actually starts out very simple. When it came out, it was basically you spawned in, and the tower you knew as you're coming up to the tower, you notice there's a giant storm. Well, then it cuts to a cutscene of the 3 Vanguard we talked about before, Cade, Zavala, and Ikora, in a meeting because all the satellites start going down and then they don't know what's going on. So they're trying to figure it out, and of course Cade's being lighthearted and giving humor, asking if they're playing a prank on him, and then eventually it is revealed that actually the Cabal, one of the enemy races that we were talking about before, has actually decided to invade the last city and the tower and destroy them with orbital bombardment and basically things to just destroy everything that the Guardians and the tower know. Well, we get there as all this is happening, and you see them dragging this big ship around, and so you go and you get put on this giant ship that just basically sent a bunch of rockets to the tower where Zavala and them were, and eventually you get to the top and you meet the main villain of the Destiny 2 campaign, which is Gaul, Dominus Gaul, who is the one who overthrew the one we knew about, which was Callus, off and exiled Callus out of the Cabal Empire and planned to take the light from the Traveler using a thing known as the Almighty, which uses the sun as its like power source, and basically was draining the light from the Traveler. And this is the first time that actually Guardians had to deal with the fact that their light was basically gone, and so you get basically punted off of his ship with no light, and your ghost is gone, and it seems like there's no hope. Well, finally, after a little bit, you meet up with Hawthorne, a new character that eventually just gets turned into a clan vendor and has nothing else going on with her, which was a little unfortunate. But you meet up with Hawthorne, and then you reconvene at the farm, where eventually you go into what is known as the Dark Forest and find a shard of the Traveler, which gives you back your light and lets you continue on with the campaign. And you go to some new destinations, which is Io, I think it's Io, Mercury. It's Io, Titan, Nessus, my bad. And you find each one of the Vanguard there. On Io, you find Ikora Ray with a guy known as Asher Mir. On Titan, you find Commander Zavala with a second in command known as Sloan. And then on Nessus, you find Cade 6 trapped in a trap, and you have to deal with a AI who's very cynical, known as Failsafe. Now, after this, they find out that you had the light. You lead a charge back to destroy Dominus Skull and the Almighty and free the Traveler. Well, as all this is going on, you push through, you get this teleporter, you get onto the Almighty, and then you basically shut it down, and then Gaul basically starts using supers against you, and you just start beating the daylights out of him, eventually to the point where you think you're winning, and then all of a sudden he dies like a normal Cabal would, and becomes this, I guess, paracausial like mist all of a sudden. And as he's doing this, becoming basically one with the light, the Traveler breaks the Almighty, and there's a flash that just kills Dominus Skull entirely, and then it sends a ripple effect out. Now, that's the ending of the Destiny 2 campaign, except for there was one more scene where we see the ripple of the light go all the way outside of our solar system and attract these pyramid ships outside of our solar system, and the pyramid ships start heading towards our solar system, which at the time everybody just classified this as, oh, it's just the darkness finally finding the traveler. And that's where Destiny 2 kind of leaves off its main campaign, is after the fact of the traveler waking up and basically being broken, but also having dispersed of Dominus Gaul. Now, the next part is going to be very brief, but there is Warmind and Curse of Osiris. Curse of Osiris is a course that find out about the Infinite Forest, and in the Infinite Forest you find out about Osiris, who was the original Warlock Vanguard before he was basically outcast and exiled from the Vanguard. He was Ikora Ray's mentor, and yeah, he got outcast because of his infatuation with the Vex. And yeah, that's basically most of what we got out of Curse of Osiris. And then Warmind reintroduces us to the Warmind Rasputin, but also the person who likes to commune with Rasputin, which is Anna Bray. Now, Anna Bray, we'll get more into Anna Bray probably in part 2, which is where we're going to go into the DLCs. But Anna Bray is a part of Bray Technologies, who was founded on who was basically the main people on Mars doing a lot of the building and research. And that's all we really get out of it. And the whole thing of Warmind is you find out that there is a hive worm god on Titan, I believe. And then you go and you kill this hive worm god on Titan. And these two DLCs were regarded very poorly in the Destiny community, and it's not hard to see why. But anyway, we're gonna go on to what people are calling the Taken King of Destiny 2, which is the third DLC in Destiny 2's history, known as the one, the only, Forsaken. So leading up to this, we got a bunch of trailers and things like that, but basically the whole gist of Forsaken was that you were called to the Prison of Elders because a bunch of the Prison of Elders people had been escaping. Which, if you guys don't know what Prison of Elders is, basic explanation is high value criminals are put into the Prison of Elders if they're not killed out in combat. And actually, Skolas from Destiny 1 is supposed to be in the Prison of Elders. But regardless, you're called to the Prison of Elders because there's an outbreak, there's a breach and a riot. And so you're going through, and it's you, Cade, and Petra. Well, as you're going through, Cade's, joking around as usual, and then at one point he, cuts this giant, I want to say, it looks like a top, but, falls down, and he falls down into the bottom part, and we see a cut scene of and it's titled, I think it's Gunslinger's Last Stand, and this is where we see one of the 3 new supers introduced with Forsaken, which is known as Blade Barrage, where as Cade is fighting, he jumps up and throws 30 knives around him, and they're all on fire, of course, because it's a solar ability. And yeah, that was one of the new ones. But yeah, everybody, there was always a third ability or a third super that you got with all of this. And yeah, anyway, so as we see Cade do all this fighting, he goes to heal with his ghost, and his ghost is shot and killed by one of these barons, which we'll find out about here in a second. who basically just destroy his ghost, which you guys don't know what happens when a guardian's ghost is destroyed. It means you are mortal, you no longer have light abilities, and you no longer are able to revive. So, as the title says, Gunslinger's Last Stand, he made a last stand and then gets yeeted into a wall by a giant, maul. And then later on, as we're pushing forward in the campaign, we see the person who supposedly let the barons out, and it's a guy in a hood, and then he reveals himself as Uldren Zav, the guy who was upset that his sister got killed in The Taken King. And so he meets up with Cade, and for some reason he just looks evil, and he straight up kills Cade. And this is the first time in the history of Destiny that a main character that everyone loves so much was killed in the story right in front of everyone. And it hit people pretty hard. People still to this day cannot get over the fact that Cade 6 died in Forsaken. Now, after this, you go on this whole hunt with Uldren Zav being like the main target, but he has a bunch of these barons, which are made of a new kind of enemy type known as the Scorn. And the Scorn are basically fallen that are reanimated and undead. And they're basically made to serve Uldren Zav and the darkness. Also, I think I forgot to say that in The Taken King, we got the Taken, which is basically when a enemy type, no matter what type it is basically reshaped into this like black and white paracausial being. They become Taken. I'm sorry I didn't mention that in the first part, but yeah, that's what the Taken are, just so then we're not confused. But basically, you hunt all these barons, including the Fanatic, the Trickster, and all these guys. You kill the people who shot Cade's ghost, beat the ever-loving Starlight out of him, and then finally you get to Uldren Zav. Well, this is where you find out something interesting. Uldren Zav was this whole time being controlled by what we thought was Marasov, but everything was kind of strange to a lot of people. The reason why is because, well, it wasn't Marasov leading him on this whole time. It was a Ankara, who are basically a mythical being that grant wishes and do deals with the Awoken, and actually who are mostly basically dead at this point. And she was posing as Marasov because she's not because eventually that drove Uldren Zav to madness, trying to get his sister back. Well, eventually you catch up to him and this Marasov clone, and finally Riven drops her disguise and turns into this what people call the meatball, which is a servitor that is infected to look like a Scorn and has egregore, I believe, or just these tentacles and stuff. It's weird. And basically it eats him, drains him of different things, including his life force. So he's sitting there basically barely alive, and there's a standoff and between you and Petra, and one of you two, as the camera fades to black, shoots Uldren Zav. And everybody analyzed the sound, but we never actually knew who shot Uldren Zav. So yeah, and then that leads us into our first seasons, which is Season of Opulence, Season of the Drifter, and then Season of the Forge, where we get to meet even more colorful characters. So firstly, Season of Opulence is centered around Callus, the emperor who was exiled from his own empire and was put on a ship known as the Leviathan, which we know of and actually has been around since probably the beginning of Destiny 2 or a little bit after the beginning of Destiny 2, and we've been getting like raids and raid layers throughout a little bit of the course of time as time went on for this location, which is located above Nessus, or used to be until the current season where it lies above, well, the moon. But basically, the whole point of Season of Opulence was basically the Guardians were trying to prove their worth to the Emperor of the Emperor of the Leviathan, Callus, who had seen this like ultimate end at some point and talked about how he had seen things, and it was weird. It was very weird. And then finally, next we had Season of the Drifter, which at this point we had what was known when Forsaken launched. It launched with a new thing known as Gambit. Gambit was run by a guy known as the Drifter. Well, not long after Gambit went live, we got Season of the Drifter, which added Gambit Prime, a more competitive version of Gambit, and also Reckoning, which gave you basically armor sets based off of what playstyle you used and what you focused it towards. And then later on, this mode was discontinued, and you won't see it in the game today, which I'm a little sad about, but sometimes that's just my dumb opinion. But anyway, it introduced us more into who the Drifter was and showed us more basically his backstory of who the Drifter was. He was a part of the, he's part of, I can't remember, but they followed a guy named Dredge and Yor, and then eventually a bunch of his buddies got killed, and he's just like, nah, I'm not doing this anymore. Then a guy meets up with him, and he's like, oh yeah, you're a dredging, and the Drifter's like, nah, it's Drifter now. And then what you find out is Drifter is using the Gambit modes to actually control the Taken. And then he got, he was used as a person of interest with the Nine, who has always had a messenger somewhere in the form of Zur, which you guys will see actually every weekend. But eventually we'll have a little bit more explanation on, certain things about the Nine. Well, more funny, comical things about the Nine, I should say. But anyway, and then that leads us into Season of the Forge, which is basically about what are known as the Armories, which the Black Armory was a bunch of forges that were made to make weaponry during the collapse, well, during the Golden Age, and then eventually the collapse happened, and then it ended up failing, and the character of Ada 1, who is new to the who is a new character to that season, was actually living underneath the tower in the Black Armory, and she goes on to tell us about how there's a bunch of memories, and you find out that she used to be human, but then she got turned into an exo, and is actually a part of the armory. And this is where we get iconic weapons like Izanagi's Burden, Le Monarch, and I think, and Jotun come from the season in particular. And in Season of the Drifter, Season of the Drifter, we got the mission for the Malfeasance, my favorite gun in the game. But anyway, after Season of the Forge, and we hit Shadowkeep, and this is where the story ends for this video. Now, with Shadowkeep, it also marked a big thing with Bungie, which was their split from Activision Blizzard, who had been a part of them since the beginning, and also who made them scrap the original story for Destiny 1 a month out of release. So, anyway, that's a bit more caught up to where we are in Destiny 2, since Forsaken was the last content that was pulled out of the game, and Shadowkeep is the next DLC that comes out afterward. So anyway, that's pushing it up to Shadowkeep. The next episode's gonna go into Shadowkeep and all the DLCs and seasons in between, and catch you up all the way up to season 18, which means we're going to be going over spoilers for the Witch Queen. We're going to be going over spoilers for Beyond Light. We're going to be going over spoilers for Shadowkeep, and we're going to be going over spoilers for the seasons in between, and talking about basically what happens up to that point. But anyway, guys, I know this is a bit of a longer video, but I hope you guys enjoyed this explanation of basically what the story is going forward. And yeah, I hope to see you all in part 2. But yeah, if you want to and you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, comment down below. What do you guys think of the story so far? I know I kind of did a more basic explanation. I didn't go into super detail about everything because there's a lot to unpack there. But anyway, guys, don't forget to subscribe, turn on post notifications, and guys, if you don't, the Crab Titan's going to come after you. Anyway, guys, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.